Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything. Geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Porkins Policy Radio. As always, I am your host, Pierce Redmond, and you can hear this show here at American Freedom Radio, AmericanFreedomRadio.com, as well as on my website, which is PorkinsPolicyReview.com. And you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, on TuneIn, of course, through RSS. You can get email updates about the show. You can follow me on YouTube. And, of course, if you'd like to support me, and help out a little bit, then you can always go to patreon.com/Pierce Redmond, and you can become a subscriber for the low price of $1 a month. And just a quick update on all of that. As many of you already know, the reward system has been switched around a bit on Patreon. So now, for as little as $1 a month, you get access to the special monthly bonus podcast. I just posted the latest bonus podcast, me and Tom Secker discussing To Play the King, Series 2 in the House of Cards trilogy. So definitely sign up if you would like to listen to that. There's a fairly long preview clip on the website right now. That hopefully will entice you to become a full subscriber. And I also want to mention too, from last week's show with Michael Swanson, me and Michael recorded about like a 15-minute little special podcast afterward, just some extra material, stuff that we couldn't get to when we were doing the show last week on AFR. So, go check that out. Of course, all Patreon members have access to the bonus podcast and to all the little specials and things like that. And I will be putting out, hopefully sometime tomorrow, I'll have a little bit of an explainer podcast, just talking about the new reward system, all that kind of stuff. I know that gotten a couple questions about the voting system. So people at the $5 level will be able to vote on future topics. So I'll hopefully have that up tomorrow or maybe the day after, sort of explaining all that. And also I would like to thank David, Chris, Jack, Jeremiah, and Kay for all signing up I think just in the past couple of days. So thank you all so much. And of course it helps support me. And also, if you would like to support American Freedom Radio, highly encourage that you do that. And you can do that through the donate button on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. There's always links up on my site to that. There's also links up in the YouTube videos and things like that. So definitely support AFR if you can. But we should get on with the show because it jam-packed, as always, a lot that I want to get to today. And we are welcoming back good friend of the show, Ryan Carey, who was last on episode 74, where we were talking about former CIA agent Tom King and his series of Batman comics. And Ryan, it has been a while, but welcome back to the show. It's glad to be talking to you. How are you?
I'm good. I apologize in advance for the sore throat and occasional sniffle.
Oh, well, yeah, no problems on that end. I'm actually, as we speak, drinking some tea right now. My throat is killing me a little bit as well. And Ryan, remind people where can they go to find out all about your work? I know you've got trashfilmguru.wordpress.com is your main site, but remind people again where they can go to read your work.
Yeah, I was getting too much shit for having too much comics content on my movie blog, so I've split it up. So Trash Film Guru is just all for movies now, and then I've got a new one, 4colorapocalypse.wordpress.com, and that's all my comic stuff from here on out. And then I've still got my weekly comics column over at Daily Grindhouse too.
Excellent. So yeah, lots of places. You can also follow Ryan on Twitter at Trash Film Guru, right?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, Ryan, this is we are again doing a comics themed show. We're talking about some pretty big topics here. And recently, you were telling me about this. He's a freelance comic book writer, Nick Spencer, and this was, I think, a couple months back. I think we were chatting on Twitter or something like that, and you had brought it up to me that this guy Nick Spencer was sort of making headlines for turning Captain America into a Nazi. Basically in Spencer's new Captain America series for Marvel, we find out that good old Cap has actually been secretly working for Hydra the whole time. Hydra, of course, is this Nazi fascist organization within the Marvel universe. I think people who have seen the new Captain America movie, Winter Soldier, will be familiar with that. I think people, many of my listeners out there are comic book fans as well. They'll be somewhat familiar. But anyway, Hydra is this sort of shadowy fascist neo-Nazi group within the Marvel universe, and specifically with Captain America. And we find out that a good old Cap has been working for them. The irony, of course, being that in reality, the U.S. was working with Nazis, all sorts of ways after the war. And that's sort of one of those topics in history that it's sort of avoided a lot of the time. But before we kind of dive into this, because Spencer himself is a very fascinating character, and there seems to be a little bit more behind this Nazi Captain America that meets the eye. Give us a little bit of an overview of Spencer's Captain America series.
Well, my first run-in with the guy was on Twitter, and I had read he did a kind of a comedy series a few years back for Marvel called Superior Foes of Spider-Man that was actually really hilarious, and I would recommend anyone to read that. And him and the artist he was working with, that guy named Steve Lieber, are working on an image book together called The Fix right now, about a couple of fuck-up, corrupt cops. It's pretty funny, too. So anyway, based on that, I picked up the first issue of his Captain America run from a couple years ago. And I read it, and I wasn't too impressed, and I didn't read any more. But I read the thing, and I thought I'd tweet to him, because he was obviously this was Captain America at the time was Sam Wilson, who people probably better know as the Falcon. They'd done a plot contrivance to make Steve Rogers really 70 or 80 years old, or however old he's supposed to be. So he couldn't continue as Captain America. So Nick Spencer started a new Captain America series at #1 with this Sam Wilson, the Falcon, as Captain America. And like I said, it was a pretty mediocre book, but it read to me like something that would be by like a Bernie Sanders supporter or something. So I tweeted to him, and I just said, hey, it looks like your version of Captain America would feel the burn. And I didn't identify myself with it as a Sanders supporter or anything like that, although I was, just basically because he was better than anybody else available. But he just went off on me for like 10, 15 minutes, just tweet after tweet at me. Turns out he was a big Hillary Clinton supporter, and he was just going apeshit. He was like, you're destroying our candidate. If we put up Bernie Sanders, he'll get destroyed by Trump. Thanks for damaging the real nominee, and just all this crazy shit. And I just blocked him. I said, that's enough of this guy. And, of course, look how his prediction all worked out. He got his nominee, and she went on and lost to Trump. So there goes his prognostication skills. But I had heard from other people that he was doing this too. He was always just picking fights with Sanders supporters left and right. And then I also heard later, which made me scratch my chin a little, that once the general election came around, he was a lot easier on Trump people than he was on the Bernie Sanders people during the primaries. So it seemed like a little bit of a strange thing. I didn't read any more of his Captain America stuff, but I followed it through the news as far as the whole Nazi Cap thing. He was preparing this storyline apparently for years in advance, where Captain America is revealed not only to be a Hydra agent, but to have always been a Hydra agent. So everything we knew about the character for the last, well, Captain America is just over 75 years old. everything we knew about him was wrong, and he was a sleeper agent for Hydra the whole time who just got woken up now. So then he came out about a year after that. Maybe it wasn't a year. Maybe it was just like 6 months after that Sam Wilson book. They came out with a second Captain America book, and that was Steve Rogers back as Captain America. So I know this sounds confusing, but for a while there, until quite recently, they had two Captain Americas, Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers. And they each had their own book, and I grabbed the first issue of that Steve Rogers one, too, and that was the one where he was revealed to have been a Hydra agent. He kills a sort of third-tier sidekick character named Jack Flag. If you're familiar with Bucky from the Winter Soldier movie and stuff, they've always been looking for sort of a Captain America works better with a sidekick, whether it's Bucky or the Falcon in the 70s. And for a while they brought in this guy, Jack Flag. And I don't know too much about him, but anyway, he ends up getting killed. And uncharacteristically, that's a comic book death that has stuck for a while. Usually they undo him. But after he kills him, that's when he's revealed to be a Hydra agent. And I don't know, it was an all right book, but I wasn't going to keep up with it at $4 a month, Marvel's cover price.
Yeah.
So I just kind of followed the storyline along through secondary things. I saw it was all leading up to a big crossover event called Secret Empire. And I don't know, do you want me to jump into what that's all about now?
Yeah, we can get into that. Yeah. Why don't you, explain a little bit about this, and then we'll kind of get into some of the backlash over the Nazi Captain America.
Okay. So Secret Empire was, as anybody out there with some familiarity with comics knows, Marvel likes to do 2 or 3 major crossover events a year. And Secret America was their last big one, and they swear it's going to be the last one they do for at least 18 months. Oh, boy. Anyway, the thing with that was Captain America is not only Hydra, he is the head of Hydra now, having killed the Red Skull and taken over the organization. And they do a coup on the U.S. because Steve Rogers is named the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., okay? And they declare a planet-wide emergency, and under those circumstances, S.H.I.E.L.D. assumes control of the U.S. government. Then he comes out of the Nazi closet as a Hydra agent to the whole world. And so Steve Rogers is basically the fascist dictator of the United States. He's not wearing the Captain America suit anymore. He's got this Hydra green and yellow regalia that he wears. And he's trapped all the superheroes either in New York, which he's put under this thing called the Dark Force Dimension. It's like some dimensional bubble that they're all trapped inside. Or he's trapped them out in distant space. Beyond, they have a planetary, there was a big controversy about whether or not S.H.I.E.L.D. should put up this planetary defense force field. And most people were against it, but when Steve Rogers took control of S.H.I.E.L.D., he got it put through. So at the cost of however many hundreds of billions, the world's governments chipped into S.H.I.E.L.D. to build this planetary defense force field, and he's trapped all the other heroes who aren't in New York out on the other side of this thing. So that's basically what's going on. The only people that are kind of running around free are secondary heroes or heroes with no real powers like Hawkeye and Black Widow and stuff like that. So there are some superheroes not trapped in New York or not trapped out in space, but it's pretty much D-listers. And so it's up to them. It's going to be up to them to overthrow the Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D. Well, there is no S.H.I.E.L.D. anymore. It's been absorbed by Hydra. So it's up to them to take on the Hydra forces, take on Steve Rogers. And here's where things get really weird. First, I don't know if your listeners out there are too familiar with the Cosmic Cube, but if you see the Marvel movies, it's referred to as the Tesseract. It's in the Avengers movies and stuff. And basically what this Cosmic Cube functions as is just the ultimate deus ex machina for a writer. It's just a crutch. It can do anything. And there was a part of the Cosmic Cube gained sentience and took form as like a 6 or 8-year-old little girl named Kobik, who was being trained by the Red Skull. And she is the one who put these memories in Steve Rogers' mind of having been raised Hydra and all this stuff. Because he had he had a mentor when he was a youth named Elisa, who's revealed to be Madam Hydra, kind of their supreme leader, even over and above the Red Skull. So she raised him kind of from a kid. He trained at a Hydra Academy in Germany or something like that, Bavaria somewhere. And so you're thinking that these are all false memories implanted in for the first part of this storyline. As it's revealed, though, this is where it gets a little goofy. I apologize to any listeners who just give up on this in frustration. It turns out that Hydra and the Nazis were allied in World War II and really won the war. Okay?
Oh, so it's like almost like an alternate universe, right?
The alternate universe is what we're thinking is what happened.
Right.
Okay? So what they did, the Allies got a hold of the Cosmic Cube after they had lost the war and rewrote reality after that. So everything we think, with the Allies winning World War II and stuff, is the fake alternate history imposed by the Cosmic Cube. And so in Steve Rogers' mind, what he's really doing is setting the universe right, because the Axis and Hydra really won World War II, but the Allies undid all that just with a Cosmic Cube. So the Cosmic Cube is now split up into, I believe it was 6 fragments. My brain's a little frazzled because I read all these Secret Empires last night and this morning. And it's a 10-issue series, but there's also a Secret Empire number 0 at the start and a thing called Secret Empire Omega at the end. So it really ran 12 issues. It went on forever. And so a lot of it is the hunt. The Cosmic Cube is split up into 6 segments, and a lot of it is the hunt. The heroes break up into various teams hunting these down and all this stuff. There's a lot of unimportant sidebars that aren't germane to anything we're talking about today, so forget that. But at the end of the day, what it amounts to is Miles Morales, the Ultimate Universe Spider-Man, who's now been moved over into this universe. Sorry for anyone who doesn't know, there are 2 Spider-Men now. There's Peter Parker, and then there's Miles Morales, who's the alternate universe Spider-Man. In Marvel's previous crossover, he was revealed to have killed Captain America in this vision of the future. But then the day comes, and they fight, and he doesn't kill him, so that was all one big red herring that seriously went on for like 2 years. But the heroes do take down Cap, but not without help from a new fake Captain America who's more like the real one. I told you this got weird. Kobik, the living Cosmic Cube, has created about 30, maybe 35-year-old Steve Rogers, who's a good, clean version without all the Hydra stuff. The kind of Steve Rogers that the world thinks was always the real one, right? And she brings him out of her little alternate dimension and into ours, and he fights Nazi Cap and wins. And at the end of the day, Nazi Hydra Cap is in prison. He's still alive. And this other perpetually young Steve Rogers, who is, again, more like the one we've grown up to reading in the comic books, is the real Cap running around out there. But he's not real. He's a construction of her memories of what Captain America should be like. Did any of that make sense?
No, yeah, it does. I mean, again, people who aren't so familiar with comics, I mean, it does make sense in, this sort of, especially in the world of Marvel where there's almost nothing original. It's all a reboot. And the same with DC. I mean, they just recycle X-Men, Captain America, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, Batman, all of these heroes just become recycled over and over and over again in very cheaply made comics.
Yeah.
But when we do see these, I would say, like, again, point people to the Tom King CIA agent, his Batman, and now this Nick Spencer Nazi Captain America, there's something we should be paying attention to. And let's dive a little bit into this, because getting away from the more sort of bizarre things like the Cosmic Cube and whatnot, what we are being presented here with, Ryan, is a world in which the Nazis won, where Captain America is a secret Nazi who's going to, I guess, shake off the shackles of American democracy and whatnot, and bring about the Fourth Reich. And at the center of this, of course, is this character Nick Spencer, who wrote this, who, as you said, portrays himself as a liberal. And he has, roused the ire of many in the comic community who claim that Marvel is basically some sort of social justice factory. They talk about, all of the, like, Spider-Man is Hispanic, and, there's a lot of female characters now, and they hate this. This is all horrible. And you and I have talked about this sort of arrested development of many in the comic community. But Spencer, it seems a bit more complicated than that. And I mean, first off, people who saw the Vice video from Charlottesville that had Chris Cantwell in it will know that one of Chris Cantwell's entourage had a Hydra t-shirt on. And there were many people in the, alt-right neo-Nazi community that got that, the inside joke of that, or the inside message behind that. It's not just coincidence that he had a Hydra t-shirt on. And Andrew Anglin of the Daily Stormer seemed to love at least the first couple of issues of this Nazi Captain America. And he gushed about it on the Daily Stormer, talking about how, there was something I found when I was looking into this. He seems to have loved it. And he said, oh, finally, look, they're getting, the morals and stuff. There's there's like a sequence where I believe it's Captain America, and there's some young Hydra agent who's going to have to be a suicide bomber, and he's sort of nervous about doing it, and Captain America says, you don't have to, and he says, no, like, this is for the greater good, and blah, blah, blah. This is the only thing that will make change. And Andrew Anglin thought this was wonderful. And he certainly promoted it amongst people at the Daily Stormer. Finally, Marvel's getting it right, and our message is being heard, and blah, blah, blah. And Spencer and Marvel, of course, have attempted to distance themselves from the far-right movement, and they, I love this line, too, that there's nothing political about this, it's just a comic book. Clearly, it's a little bit more than that, and it's obviously political if, it's not, I don't know, how could it not be? When you're basically saying that the Nazis won and Captain America's a Nazi, and now, he's going to bring about Hydra rule and blah, blah. It's obviously political. Now, maybe Marvel and Spencer are, I assume that for Marvel, it probably is just entertainment. They don't really care. Maybe, they sort of see this as a marketing ploy. People are talking about the alt-right and the white power movement and neo-Nazis, so let's try to sort of cash in on this. And obviously, the good Captain America prevails at the end of all of this. So perhaps this is just sort of entertainment for them. But with Spencer, it seems to be another story. And you directed me to some very fascinating articles that we'll link up to in the show notes by Kim O'Connor, who's a comics blogger. But she writes about other stuff as well, not just comics.
She's a first-class writer. Everyone should follow her stuff. Yeah.
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, I guess, that's unfair to say she does write about comics, but she writes about all sorts of things, politics, and she's quite fun. Even if you don't like her politically, she's quite funny, and I love her style of writing. It's great. But she unearthed some really interesting stuff about Nick Spencer, who ran for city council in Cincinnati back in 2003 and 2005, very unsuccessfully. He finished 21st and 17th place, respectively. But his platform was basically at least in 2005 especially, consisted of basically cleaning up the streets of Cincinnati and ridding them of drug dealers, thugs, and prostitutes, which he used over and over again throughout his platform, on his literature for his campaign, all that stuff. Now, obviously, these are mostly code words for people of color.
The whole thing was ridding his neighborhood of black-owned businesses and even just black residents.
Yeah, and let's dive into this a bit, because I think this is really, again, like I said, you can dismiss the Nazi Captain America as whatever, but you look at his political platform, and like I said, so here was his idea to rid Cincinnati of drug dealers and prostitutes. He wanted to hire more cops. So that's good. More young, inexperienced, trigger-happy guys. I'm sure that's gonna, just do gangbusters. Right, yeah, 200. Again, it's like, where are you even gonna get 200 guys? But anyway, that aside, then he wanted to implement Rudy Giuliani's, like, broken window, bullshit quality of life stuff. And stated that he would stop murder by going after drug dealers and prostitutes, which essentially victimless crimes. I'm not saying drug dealers don't promote crime and the lifestyle of those things obviously lead to crime, but essentially, they're not out murdering people. Or that's not necessarily the best way to combat crime in a huge city like Cincinnati. He also wanted to increase penalties for drug and prostitution crimes. So again, punishing, people for essentially making their own life choices. Yeah. And Ryan, before we get any further, he was running as a Republican then, right?
No, I thought so at first. He was presenting himself. I had some conversations with a couple people. I wasn't even in the country around 2003, 2005. I was bumming around the world, but I know a couple of guys who were on the old Bendis forums back then. Brian Michael Bendis is one of Marvel's big writers, and he used to run a fan forum, and this is where Nick Spencer really kind of first became known in the comic scene. He was a real loudmouth on there, and everybody hated his guts. And he presented himself on there as a big, hardcore conservative Republican. But when he ran for city council, apparently Cincinnati is a three-party town. They have Republicans, Democrats, and they have a third outfit called the Charterist Party, which apparently is for people that even the Republicans aren't right-wing enough for, go for this Charterist outfit. And that's who he was running under, the Charterist Party endorsement. So he owned a nightclub. Him and a couple other guys owned a nightclub in a neighborhood called Over the Rhine in Cincinnati. And I guess his big deal was he was really trying to gentrify that neighborhood. And he was making a nuisance of himself. There were a couple of black-owned clubs that he wanted shut down. Did you see the thing about the black DJ at the radio station that he was getting in a tiffle with?
Yeah. This all stems from a local shooting. Again, there's shootings all the time. But he picks this one particular local shooting in Cincinnati, and he blames it on this guy Ross Love, who owned a popular local radio station. Although he did not own the radio station at the time that Spencer accused him of promoting he basically said the shooting was because Ross Love played Ridin' by Chameleonaire, which is actually, is a song about like racial profiling and it's not really Spencer just clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. But yeah, you see, he basically said this guy Ross Love, was the reason he should be, thrown in jail or something because
I think he did say that he should be put in jail. Yeah.
Well, and I want to get to that in 1 second. Just two other things on his campaign. And then let's get into his accusations at local business. Also, just quickly again, the increased penalties for drug prostitution. He wanted to implement Giuliani's ComStat software, which is just an insane, wild police thing. I mean, anybody that's from New York just knows it's crazy. And anytime you invoke Rudy Giuliani in we're going to clean up the streets, I mean, it basically means locking up thousands of people for basically nothing, stop and frisk. ComStat, which is this bogus software that Giuliani still peddles to this day, that's, it's supposed to help you streamline and you can figure out crime and stuff like that. Or, ship all the homeless and undesirable people out of the city. Shut down mental institutions, things like that. Spencer wanted to build more jails to ensure
jail.
Right, and then I love this. The kicker is because he wanted to ensure that dealers and prostitutes stayed locked up more. So again, back to this theme of dealers and prostitutes. So rather than, keeping murderers and rapists off the street, it's really what we have to do is keep the dealers and the prostitutes off the street. Which is, I don't know what the hell, we need to get like some sort of Freudian analysis on this guy's obsession with prostitutes and dealers. He then he calls, I love this, Ryan, he calls for cutting virtually all human services to pay for the new cops and the jails. I mean, he wants to, what is it? He said he wants to get rid of all the homeless shelters and use the money that went to them to pay for more cops on the street.
Yep.
And then he talks about using eminent domain to move homeless shelters and services out of the neighborhoods they service. He also said that, shelters and things like that encourage people to be homeless. Yeah, and panhandling, which is like, I can sort of understand his logic there to a degree, but, again, spend a night and nobody wants to be in a homeless shelter. They're pretty terrifying places for the most part.
Oh, they're the worst.
Yeah, and underlying all of this, and this, you can kind of get your take on this, Ryan, is that this is all really about ensuring that all of these white businesses in Cincinnati flourish. That's like what it all boils down with him is like, and then we'll have, wonderful new little hip bars and cafes and it's all about keeping the business, in Cincinnati thriving. Yet he'll then go on and on about black-owned clubs, black-owned radio stations. I mean, talk about this a little bit, Ryan.
Well, it looks to me at the end of the day like Spencer's big thing is he doesn't want certain people to make a living so that he's able to make a living, if that makes sense. He's got no problem with all these gentrified, yuppie-ass businesses trying to come into his area, but the people that were originally in that neighborhood in the first place, who he accuses all of being pimps and drug dealers and hookers, probably half of them weren't, but he wants them all out so that the type of businesses he likes can come on in. So basically, it boils down to me, the guy sounds like a racist asshole. There's no real nice way of putting it. Some of the language he used in some of those posts that are in Kim O'Connor's thing shows pretty well exactly what he thinks of the black residents in his neighborhood. There was a story in there, and I know you saw this one because we were BSing about it earlier, where some guy was going, like, probably throwing away some trash. Yeah, and Spencer accused him of being a pimp who was going for a gun that he had hidden in a trash can, so he speeded his car out of there before he could get shot.
Yeah. Oh, no, and he says that he was laying into his horn, okay, to stop. Let me see if I can. Oh yeah, so he says he was laying into his horn to scare off Johns from quote a set of barely pubescent girls and their pimp while waiting for the police to arrive, and then he drove off because the pimp reached into a corner trash can. So now listen, maybe this is true, okay? Maybe there was a pimp and some, and his child prostitutes and their Johns lining up, all over the place, and Spencer is trying to do the right thing. Or perhaps there's some grandfather and his grandchildren, it could be anything. Some old guy and some kids.
5 or 6 people hanging out on a corner talking.
Yeah, right. I mean, it really sounds, again, it's like the sort of like insane racial, I don't know, like fantasies, about prostitutes and drug and pimps. And this is like, you can just imagine this fucking dickhead driving around the streets of Cincinnati, blasting his horn, probably calling the cops nonstop.
Oh, it sounds like he did call the cops nonstop back then, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and some old guy goes to throw out a cup of coffee with his granddaughter, and he's a pimp that's going to get a gun. Ryan, explain, because this one is like, it's almost like it's too insane with this dude. Explain a bit about the sinister cabal of drug dealer and hooker assassins that went after Nick Spencer.
Well, yeah, he claimed that there was some sort of cabal, that he was well known for trying to clean up the area, and that there was a sort of cabal, like you say, of hookers, drug dealers, pimps, and whoever who were out to kill him. One morning, he apparently found a bullet had busted his car windshield. And he said it was no accident, it was no coincidence, they're trying to kill me. Dude, if they're trying to kill you, I think they'd wait and shoot you while you were in the car. Chances are it was some stray bullet from something or other nicked his windshield and ended up in there. I don't know. But he figured that that he was this crusader. Talk about, this is probably where his love for superheroes comes from.
Yeah.
He sees himself as this neighborhood crusader out to clean up his neighborhood in Cincinnati. And he admitted that he called the cops all the time on every little thing. And that, boy, it's just so crazy. And that this got him noticed. He said a variation, I'm not looking at the article right now, but as I remember, he claimed that all the hookers and dealers knew who he was. Yeah. So they were gunning for him. It's just paranoia all the way. And yeah, every time you notice there's a racial component to all of it. Oh
yeah, absolutely. Well, and too, I believe the bullet, message was like the day after New Year's, which is not an excuse.
Like that, yeah.
But people do fire guns off on New Year's. If you go to Los Angeles, it happens all the time.
Oh yeah, Detroit.
Detroit, yeah. It happens in New York too. It's not an excuse, and it's wildly dangerous, especially if you're shooting it straight up in the air, it's sort of safe. I mean, not safe, but it's, it's your chances of hurting someone are cut in half. But if you fire at an angle, you can kill somebody. But yeah, I mean, he instantly jumps to, they're out to get me. This is a message. And I was gonna go exactly where you were going with this. He is a superhero. And this is about him, being sort of vigilante. Much of that sort of rhetoric about like cleaning up, the decadence and the muck and stuff really is something that Andrew N.G.E.N complimented on the Daily Stormer in regards to his Captain America Nazi storyline.
I'm gonna have to take a look at that.
I'll try and find. I have the link somewhere. I'll pull it up, or we'll throw it in the show notes. But I believe it was some screenshots. There might have even been links to the Daily Stormer, or from archive.org or something like that. But and just as another smattering of some of his other things. I mean, he again, saying that Ross Love, the radio station, playing basically, he's saying playing hip hop encourages shootings. Sure. Even though there's nothing, especially in that instance, to link them. He blamed the same shooting on a bunch of black owners of a local club, the Ritz, which
he was
seemed to have
about that club.
Nothing to do with the shooting. He referred to the Ritz patrons, like on Saturday night, as 300 armed drug dealers. Yep. Okay. And this is a black club.
Because they hired off-duty cops as security there.
Yes. Yeah. And again, this is a black club. So when he's saying 300 armed drug dealers, that's code. Okay. He went on and on complaining about, the Ritz patrons going into his favorite IHOP.
Oh, that was nuts.
And starting fights, and, they're all a bunch of animals. He says something about, like, where is it? I'm trying to find – oh, yeah, this is the quote. He's talking about how insane they are, and crazy, and they get into fights and they get their asses, kicked and shit. He said, quote, "I see stray dogs act with more survival instinct than some of the Ritz clientele." So, I mean, if that's not racist, or, if you're not getting the message that he's trying to promote here, and it's not just us. There were a bunch of, black community activists and other things, and some bloggers in the Cincinnati area that were like, this dude is off his fucking rocker.
Oh, yeah, there was a big, apparently the local Cincinnati blogging scene was pretty active back then, and Spencer was viewed pretty much among that crowd the same way he was on the old Bendis forums, which is just that people thought he was a loud, belligerent asshole.
And he co-owned some crappy bar that that he used to like DJ at. So you can already tell this guy's a jerk. And you know who this type of person is. I'm sure you've seen him before. Very much the Gavin McGinnis white hipster. Who's a racist. That sort of a guy. Who likes the idea of, this gritty city life, but, if only all the blacks and the immigrants and the poor people were gone, and it was this sort of haven for rich, white guys, that could go to IHOP and, and not have to deal, with seeing a minority person.
Sure. That's the Gavin McGinnis comparison is pretty good because they really are just basically they have the opinions of a 90-year-old great-grandfather, but are trying to dress it up in this kind of hip, alternative, youthful bullshit sort of window dressing.
No, definitely, and I think, that's their whole thing. And Gavin McGinnis is the king of that, literally the king of all, the great-grandfather of all of that. Excuse me. But Ryan, explain also too the he at one point Spencer attempted to block a bunch of black businesses from moving over the Rhine, right?
Yeah, it's the guys that own that Ritz Club were trying to take over to get a business license at an empty space in his area, and evidently he was leading a neighborhood charge. The article doesn't say what became of that, but he was trying to lead a big neighborhood charge to prevent them from getting a business license for this vacant building, even though he was really heavily campaigning against vacant buildings and had a real hard-on for getting squatters out of his neighborhood, too.
That's another thing in his platform, right?
Yep, was getting rid of squatters and enforcing code on vacant buildings and all this authoritarian bullshit. And so these guys, you'd think that he would welcome somebody taking over this vacant property because he said they were all sort of threats to the community to have these vacancies, but he was leading this neighborhood campaign to prevent them from getting a business license for this place. Now, one thing we should point out is that he had this was weird. If people out there are familiar with Bleeding Cool, it's like basically the National Enquirer gossip site of the comics world.
Yeah.
And they put a big piece up basically refuting a lot of Kim O'Connor's claims, but what they didn't admit was that they let Spencer basically write the whole thing himself and just put it out there. Rich Johnston the owner of Bleeding Cool, allowed Spencer to rebut every point in his own words, and he just typed it all up verbatim. And that didn't come out till later, and they never even identified it in the article. So if you're Googling around further and you find Nick Spencer's response to Kim O'Connor's articles on Bleeding Cool, it will not identify Spencer as the de facto author of the piece, because Rich Johnston never identified that he just gave Spencer – he basically acted as Nick Spencer's transcriptionist. He called him up, read all her points to him, and he counterpunched on each one of them, and Johnston just typed it up. It's typical of their sloppy journalism at Bleeding Cool.
Oh yeah, and and this sort of goes towards this the constant reinvention of Nick Spencer, because also so along with trying to stop the pimps and hoes and drug dealers and whatnot.
Anyone interesting from being
and he always framed it with this sort of economic, we got to protect the white business class, like the bar that he co-owned. He talked a lot about the revitalization of Cincinnati, and he was going to invest all his money, and he was going to open a new bar. And then he ended up stiffing all the contractors that he hired. He got evicted, and then he just up and left in the middle of the night. and moved to New York City and then reinvented himself as a comic writer and then wrote this Nazi Captain America. So,
well, yeah, there were a couple steps in between, but that's basically it. Mr. I'm for the, well, how should I put this? Mr. Oh, I'm for the businessman. We need good, solid, reputable businesses like mine and not these dastardly hip-hop clubs and stuff. You're right. He ends up stiffing all his contractors, stiffing his employees, and splitting town in the middle of the night and moving to New York because before he turned up at Marvel, he managed to sell his first series to Image, and it was called Morning Glories, and I think it ran for like 50 or 60 issues, okay? And I never really followed it, but it was one of these comics that's basically a TV treatment ready to go. And it was reasonably popular, and that ran, like I said, for about 50, 60 issues. And Marvel took notice of that and kind of hired him for some marginal superhero gigs. And then he lands the Captain America jobs after a couple years there. And this is the weird thing. We were talking about Bendis earlier, right? And normally these big Marvel crossovers, those are Bendis's baby all the way. He gets all of them. It's very unusual to see a writer other than Bendis land a big Marvel crossover book. They had a guy there for a few years named John Hickman, but he left, and he's just doing creator-owned stuff now at Image. So, I don't know, maybe Nick Spencer is a guy that they're kind of grooming for bigger things by giving him this high-profile thing, which is basically Marvel's event of the year. Secret Empire is their major, it's the comic book equivalent to a summer blockbuster movie. And by him landing,
this is huge. This is
huge.
It's
totally
this is
huge.
not, yeah, exactly. And this, of course, makes you wonder, if they know of his political views and whatnot. Ryan, we're coming up towards the end of the first hour, so I think we'll probably continue a bit of this discussion on Spencer in the second hour, and we've got some other stuff we're going to get to. But quickly now, I mean, should we be viewing Nazi Captain America through the lens of his racist, failed city council run?
I don't see why not. Couple things to dovetail back to a point you mentioned earlier. Marvel was kind of, I don't know, I can't remember, you'll have to forgive me, I can't remember how you put it, but they were trying to make it clear that this Captain America was a bad guy and stuff, and they weren't endorsing this Nazi cap idea. But at the same time, where do you think those T-shirts and baseball caps that these alt-right guys are wearing came from? Marvel is selling licensed Nazi Captain America or Hydra Captain America T-shirts, baseball caps. They had all those ready to go by the time the first issue was printed.
Yeah.
So
and that's a really fascinating point too, because, it's not, you can be a fan of a villain. You know what I mean?
Sure.
In comic books. That happens all the time. And, we love the anti-hero and things like that. Even some of the bad guys. People love the fucking Joker.
He's huge, yeah.
But I get it. It's just a comic, but Hydra is a Nazi fascist organization. I don't know that many people that are like, oh, I'm going to dress up like, the Red Baron, or something like that. I mean, people don't do this. It's not as, I don't know. It didn't have the same sort of, allure that it seems to have right now. And like you said, they're licensing this crap. They are selling this. They know full well that, that they might be and I think the fact that these comics came out at a time when this whole movement began to kind of pick up steam, at least somewhat, the media began to kind of take notice of it. I think people, like us that are a bit more in tune to the alternative media and things have seen the rise of Nazis and the white power movement more and more. But, like you said, Ryan, they were licensing this stuff. They're selling Hydra, aka, fascist logo, T-shirts, baseball hats, posters.
Well, there was a specially designed Hydra Captain America logo that they came up with for this miniseries, right? Because he, like I said, he wore kind of a different outfit. He wore this Hydra regalia thing. And so there's a special logo on that because he's referred to as the Hydra Supreme. So the Hydra Supreme has his own kind of seal. And that's the one that you see on these baseball caps and T-shirts that Richard Spencer and his other stormtroopers are wearing around.
Mm. Yeah, and it's hitting me too. Just talking about that, and a bit sort of maybe some inside baseball, nerd culture and things. But you look at like people that like love, like any of the Call of Duty games and stuff like that, where you can play as Nazis and I mean, no one is like going around though like, yeah, I'm a Nazi. No one's like cosplaying as a Nazi. Let's put it that way.
Not.
Yeah, I mean, you hope not, right? Exactly. But there aren't that many, people aren't going to comic book conventions necessarily dressed as like Nazis and fascists. Now, I'm sure there are some, that do that and, it's bound to happen, I suppose. But there is something a bit weird about Marvel pushing this as like this like commodity, buy, this t-shirt that has that for anybody reading it is a fascist villain.
Right.
I mean, there's no way around that.
Here's a really bizarre irony. I'm sure you've seen the cover over the years. Even people that don't follow comics closely are very familiar with the cover of Jack Kirby's and Joe Simon's Captain America #1. And it's Captain America decking out Hitler. Now we find out 75 years later they were on the same side the whole time.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, it's such a, and like I said, I mean, the irony being that, of course, we worked, or, by we, the, U.S. security, state, and military, of course, worked with the Nazis afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't see,
a little bit,
even during, yeah, right. But, I don't, that's, like you said, I would assume Jack Kirby would be rolling in his grave. He's Jewish too, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, Jack Kirby was Jewish. His real name was Yaakov Kurtzenberg.
Okay, there you go. I mean, and now his beloved character is a secret Nazi.
Yep.
I mean, the implications of that are just astounding. And again, too, we're talking about the timing of these things is so interesting. And I mean, again, Ryan, just speak a little bit more to this idea. I mean, like what? Because I can get Marvel being like, oh, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, do you think for Marvel they're just seeing the dollar signs in this? I mean, is this comic even selling all that well?
I think it's sold pretty well for their stuff. You have to understand Marvel's kind of having a little bit of difficulty across the board these days, which is people that only know them from their movies would find that kind of hard to believe. But the crossovers do pretty well, and I would think that aside from Batman, I think that I'd have to go back and check the sales charts to be sure, but I think that in the 4 or 5 months that it ran, I think that Secret Empire was probably second only to Batman on the Diamond sales charts every month, so it did well.
Mm.
Nick Spencer's regular Captain America series didn't sell especially well, and so they've relaunched that all over again with one of the fan favorite creative teams of Chris Samney and Mark Waid. So Spencer is off Captain America, but I don't know. He just did this big crossover thing, and chances are they'll have something big lined up for him next too, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean that'll be the thing to check out is to see if Spencer disappears or if he continues this. And I just find it so bizarre too. You kind of alerted me to this. I wasn't aware. There's a whole bunch of YouTube celebrities, I guess, that have emerged criticizing Marvel as being some sort of social justice thing. And I guess we'll have to pick that up in the second hour because we are at the break right now. I am speaking with a good friend of the show, Ryan Carey, and we will be continuing this in the second hour, so stay tuned.
It's practically narcotic.
Freedom.
Oh, yes, I like very much.
Radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
Since the beginning, civilizations have risen and fallen. Rome, ancient Persia, Mongolia, Britain, and now America. Befallen by natural disasters, broken families, moral decay, lack of preparedness and conflict. Don't let this happen to you. Are you prepared? Would you like to help others prepare? AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com is looking for distributors. Email bugoutamerica@usa.com. Go to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, a veteran-owned and operated company. But do it today.
This is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
And I hope people support American Freedom Radio. And I hope people vote with their dollars and really understand the value of having American Freedom Radio. Because that's my family. If you love me at all, Jack Blood, support American Freedom Radio. Like, my family has literally disowned me. American Freedom Radio, Danny and Don and those guys, those are my actual family. So please support these guys, because they have all the technology, they have all these great things that they're going to do, but obviously they can't do it all by themselves. So not only would I like to see you support them, I'd like to see you retweet them and repost them and really get involved and get on the bandwagon, so to speak, on doing that do-it-yourself promotion, because they're a do-it-yourself radio network, and we just need that so much.
And when we're not invading some sovereign nation or setting it on fire from the air, which is more fun for our Nintendo pilots, then we're usually declaring war on something here at home. Did you ever notice that about us? We love to declare war on things here in America. Anything we don't like about ourselves, we declare war on it. We don't do anything about it. We just declare war on it. It's the only metaphor we have in our public discourse for solving problems, declaring war. We have to declare war on everything. We have a war on crime, the war on poverty, the war on litter, the war on cancer, the war on drugs. But you ever notice we got no war on homelessness? Huh? No war on homelessness. You know why? There's no money in that problem. No money to be made off of the homeless. If you could find a solution to homelessness where the corporate swine and the politicians could steal $2 million each, you see the streets of America begin to clear up pretty quick. I'll guarantee you that. I will guarantee you that.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow. Friendships to flourish with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio@ymail.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control is good. 5, roger copy. 3, 2, 1, engage.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio. Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything. Geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, Pierce Redmond here for Porkins Policy Radio. If you are just joining us right now in the second hour, we have been, we were joined in the first and in the second hour by a good friend of the show, Ryan Carey. Of course, you can find his work at trashfilmguru.wordpress.com, dailygrindhouse.com, and also fourcolораpocalypse.wordpress.com, all of which will be linked up to in the show notes, including our previous episode that we did back on episode 74. And of course, just a reminder, if you want to support me and everything I do, if you enjoy having a radio show where we can talk, 1 week about the Ken Burns, Lynn Novick propaganda film about the Vietnam War, and then another week talk about Nazi Captain America, then I highly encourage you to go to patreon.com/Pierce Redmond and become a subscriber. And of course, I cannot encourage people enough to support American Freedom Radio, which of course is the gives me this outlet to talk to all of you. And very briefly, because I want to get to all the stuff. If you're not tired of listening to me, I will be on Chuck Ocelli's show tonight for another 2 hours. So if you need to hear me talk about stuff, you can tune in there. And just to let everyone know, if you haven't already heard, I will be on Chuck's show 4 Tuesdays out of the month. So check that out. There's a little bit of information about that on Twitter and stuff. You can find more information on that. But we are here with Ryan Carey. Ryan, we were just towards the end of the first hour. Before we got to the break, we were kind of talking about these YouTube, these like armchair comics critics on YouTube that you pointed me to. I was not familiar with them, and sort of pleasantly glad to have not been aware of them. But I am now. They constantly go on and on. They're harping on about Marvel being some sort of a social justice factory. They seem to hate Nick Spencer as well, even though I suppose they're just unaware of his political beliefs about drug dealers and prostitutes. But they've created this little like cottage industry on YouTube. They get tens, if not hundreds of thousands of views where they basically just every day complain about Marvel, including, all sorts of things that they claim are part of some sort of liberal agenda or something. Len, you wanted to kind of say your piece on this, so tell us about this.
It seems a little strange. There seems to be about a half dozen guys that are doing their level best to sort of bring over the Gamergate mentality over to comics, and YouTube seems to be their preferred hangout. I know that for other kind of fan scenes, it's a lot of times 4chan and Reddit and stuff. But these guys are all over YouTube. So I guess if there's one good thing about YouTube demonetizing everything these days, it'll be the fact that these assholes will be broke again. But there's about a half dozen of them, and yeah, they've really got Nick Spencer in their sights. I don't understand why, because it's really bizarre that a guy who made Captain America a Nazi, who ran for city council 2 times on basically a campaign of driving all black residents and businesses out of his neighborhood, is somehow an SJW, as they call it, is absurd. Their main thing that they're mad about, though, is that they just don't like the fact that Marvel has some characters of color these days, when they never really used to, except for maybe the Falcon and Luke Cage. That was about it back in the day. And they're really mad. They are upset that Ms. Marvel, which is one of Marvel's few sales successes these days, they're upset that she's a young Muslim lady and isn't portrayed as, I guess, being some terrorist jihadi or something. Basically, if you put these 6 or 8 guys together in a room, you wouldn't have the IQ of a barn stable. You've watched enough of their stuff to know that. They're all a bunch of total idiots. They're subliterate. They ramble on in their videos and make the same points over and over. And I don't know, some of those view numbers that you mentioned, like they all have 10, 15,000 views, I wonder if it's the same guys just clicking on it again and again and just one big circle jerk to drive their numbers up.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all, or if they're buying them. You know, there's all sorts of ways you can manipulate views on YouTube, which is why I just could care less about YouTube views, you know.
Yeah.
And they boast about it too, you know, like it's their fucking dick size or something.
Oh, it's
who
total dick
cares?
Yeah.
A
friend of mine who put up like one very tepid response to some of their bullshit. Their big slam on him was, I looked at all 150 of his videos and none of them have more than 600 views or something.
That's how they measure everything. Yeah. And, you know, I can tell you from firsthand experience, people on YouTube suck. It is a cesspool of, you know, just negativity, racists, homophobes, and just, you know, just social retards, basically.
Every one of these guys you can tell has no social skills. Like I told you off air, it looks to me like a collection of 40-year-old virgins.
Yeah, absolutely. And none of, or maybe some of them do, but, you know, most of them they don't show their face, their identity is unknown, you know, so again, they're fine hiding behind the veneer of anonymity, through a YouTube channel. But, you know, I mean, they're not gonna come up to one of these people on the street and complain.
These guys don't, and they're missing the big point, which we've discussed before, is that the reason that Marvel has made Miles Morales Spider-Man and Riri Williams 15-year-old black teenager as Iron Man and a 16-year-old Muslim Miss Marvel is because Marvel is presented with something that no comics company has been before. Their movie success means that they need to develop replacement characters because the actors are getting old. Robert Downey, who should have been put out to pasture a decade ago, in my opinion.
Definitely.
Seriously, I hate that guy. I mean, back in the day, I liked him, but basically he's been playing the guy he played in Zodiac ever since.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is probably not too far off from what he's like in real life. Sherlock Holmes is Tony Stark with a British accent, all this shit. So these guys are getting to be 50, 60 years old. Chris Evans has already made noise that he wants to leave as Captain America. They need replacement characters on the big screen unless they're going to reboot their whole cinematic universe, but I don't think they can afford to. I just don't. So these new characters that Marvel's bringing along on the printed page that are younger and reflect, I guess, to a greater degree the youth of today is because they're going to need to be the replacements on the big screen. Yeah, okay. Iron Man might only be selling 60,000 now that Riri Williams has taken over, but I bet you that when she makes her debut on the big screen, it'll be a big deal, and it'll keep the youth market.
Oh, yeah, and I think this sort of, like, to the heart of it is, I mean, again, there's a bunch of, you know, people sitting in either their mother's basement or their basement with no real concept of how, you know, the comics economy or just how business works.
Right, because they're toilet scrubbers or something.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I mean, it's just, there's also something, you know, and then we'll move on to, the other major thing we wanted to get to. But there's the thing that really kind of just pissed me off with all these videos and stuff. And again, it's this like, it's this like cottage industry that consists of complaining about other people's hard work, you know? Or just other people's work and effort. And to just constantly complain about it, again, with a sort of racial or a gender, you know, tone to it. Like they're destroying, again, it's like they portray themselves as alternative. You know, they're part of nerd culture. Which to me, and again, this might be perhaps I'm, you know, colored by the fact that I grew up in New York. But, you know, most of the nerdy people I knew were fairly tolerant. open-minded because, you know, the whole, we're persecuted as nerds, you know what I mean? So why would we go around persecuting other people? But, you know, again, they try to kind of maintain this, like, you know, we're cool, we're nerds, blah, 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 you know, that has sort of become more socially acceptable and hip. Yet, like you said, like a Gavin McGinnis, they espouse the, you know, political ideology of their grandfather, you know?
Yep.
Of some tired, angry, bitter old man. And the main thing for me is that I just wanted to sort of scream at these guys, don't buy Marvel then. There's a million other comics out there. I would say, and almost all of them are 1,000 times better than anything. The best that Marvel has to offer is still mediocre compared to almost anything that Image or any other comics company is putting out there. So I don't know why they insist on, you know, buying from them.
Well, the other thing, too, is why don't they point the finger at the most logical culprit for why Marvel's stuff isn't doing that good, which is that it has totally repetitive stories, like you were saying earlier, a reboot of a reboot of a reboot, and then lousy, mediocre art.
Yeah.
I mean, most people that I know still, when they open up a comic book, and if the art looks bad, you're not going to buy it.
Yeah, right. Why would you?
There's no reason to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Marvel's biggest problem, and if Marvel was such a progressive SJW company, how come they're still paying freelancers a crummy page rate and not giving them health insurance?
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, the reality of, I mean, you know, most people that, especially for big companies where you would think they would be, they're treated worse.
There's nothing even marginally, hell, work for hire, comics freelancing is like Republican wet dream economics writ large.
No, of course, but I mean, again, we're talking about a group of, you know, young to middle-aged men that really have, I mean, zero grip on reality.
That's for sure.
You know, and truly live. I mean, that's what I found so funny listening to these guys rail on about Nick Spencer. I mean, it's like, you're as much of a fantasist as he is. You know, while he was battling hookers and drug dealers in Cincinnati, I mean, you're right there with him in this fantasy world that you live in. That, you know, basically just consists of making shitty YouTube videos complaining about things that aren't even real or that you could change if you wanted to. You know, vote with your dollar. Don't buy Marvel comics.
Exactly.
Maybe they'll change.
And they're buying them. Like the one guy we were talking about, I'll mention one of their names because that's all. I don't want to give too much pub to any of them. But the ringleader of the bunch, who the other guys seem bizarrely jealous of, is a complete numbskull who goes by the name of Diversity in Comics. And he bitches and bitches about Marvel and how their books aren't selling, but he never shows his face, which is probably doing the rest of us a favor. But he shows a new print copy of every Marvel book he's talking about. So he's buying this shit. Why do you buy something that you don't like?
Oh, I mean, the people that listen to 2 hours of me on the radio just to complain on YouTube, you know, to write a nasty comment. It's like, well, why'd you listen to me then?
Yeah. I'm sure all my old friends from last time I was on will be back.
Oh yes, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
Who was that one guy? Obama is a Muslim or something?
Oh, there was. His the YouTube hand. Yeah, he used to be one of he always had a comment to throw my way.
He got pissed at me. He called Alex Jones the world's #1 patriot.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, I mean, some people you can't help when they're that hard on.
They need lobotomies.
Yeah. Moving on to this another hugely important topic and something that you again brought to my attention is this controversy that just took place a few months ago, or not even a few weeks ago, I guess, at ComicCon here in New York, and it was over a partnership between Marvel and Northrup Grumman, the aerospace defense contractor. They were going to have a booth at Comic-Con, both of them together, and there was even talk, and there are pictures of the proposed cover that was going to be an Avengers comic where they work with N.G.E.N, which stands for Northrup Grumman Elite Nexus. And this was an all-ages comic that allegedly was going to have full-page ads and info on employment at Northrop Grumman. Ryan, what is going on with this story?
That's a really weird one. So, yeah, I had some friends at NYCC word got out of this. There was going to be a panel announcement. Marvel and Northrup Grumman had arranged a time in one of the conference rooms there at the Javits Center to make their big announcement that they had this co-production partnership. And it was, did you see any of the mock-up ads too? Because Marvel did ads in one of the articles I sent you links for on the show notes. You'll see them. Marvel did mock-up ads for Northrop Grumman too that say dream and reality. So like in one picture it says dream and it shows the vision. And then the other side of the page says reality and it shows some transhumanist technology beaming into some kid's head. Courtesy of Northrop Grumman. Yeah, so I guess the deal was this comic was not only a kid's comic, but it was going to be a freebie, like a kind of thing they hand out. Notice on the cover mock-up, there's no cover price. So this was going to be a freebie that they handed out that has Marvel teamed up with these characters that, they created for Northrop Grumman called the N.G.E.N. What did you say that stood for again? Northrop Grumman Elite Nexus.
Grumman Elite Nexus, yeah.
Boy, nothing kind of Orwellian about that, is there?
Yeah.
So they were going to team up, and I guess basically the plot was going to be that the Avengers can't win the day with their powers and have to rely on Northrop Grumman's spy and aerospace technology in order to defeat whatever villains they were going up against, take your pick. So this was a big deal. Apparently Marvel thought it would go off without a hitch or that people would even be kind of jazzed for it because they announced this whole big panel, and I think they had a couple Northrop Grumman reps with them at NYCC. And then word started getting out on Twitter that this was happening, and everybody was like, everybody except our YouTube friends, of course. Everybody on Twitter, all the comics fans and all the comics fans on Instagram and other platforms were like, what the fuck is this? Let's go and demonstrate at this panel, or else let's go by the Marvel booth now and tell them what we think and all this. And so a couple hours before the panel was to convene, Marvel announced that it was postponed. They weren't going to do the panel announcement. And then I think it was either later the same day or early the next, Marvel announced that they were pulling out of the deal with Northrop Grumman altogether. And Northrop Grumman confirmed that, yes, it was Marvel's decision to pull out of this deal. We were excited about the possibilities of, I forget how they put it, but the point was that it was basically trying to recruit kids into taking science classes and going on to college and coming to work for Northrop Grumman.
STEM is what they call it, which is science.
Yeah, what is that stand for?
Science, technology, engineering mathematics.
Yeah.
And STEM is not even exclusive to Northrop Grumman. A lot of these weird aerospace defense contractor companies use it, like Boston Dynamics always talks about STEM. And it's sort of it's like it's a euphemism, and it's like a nice way of basically recruiting. I escaped my mind for a minute. It's not one that I've heard. My background as an English major is showing, I guess. But yeah, I know what it is now that you jog my memory. But yeah, that was the thing, is it said they wanted to get kids interested in STEM and show them the career possibilities available down the road at Northrop Grumman. So basically it was a recruiting tool for other people so that they can keep on inventing technologies of death for the future, I guess. Well, definitely. And Ryan, here's before we kind of dive into perhaps why they're doing this, I did find it fascinating how quick the response was. I mean, I think I was literally on the air doing an interview on someone's show, and you were texting me like, "Oh my God, look at this!"
Oh, that's right.
And
right.
And then like 10 minutes later, you text me again, and you say, "Oh, it's all done now. It's gone." Like they were able to shut it down, which in some ways is quite encouraging that, even a company as huge as Marvel, can be influenced by, its fan base, refusing to accept some, giant propaganda advertisement for military-industrial complex. But, a lot of these comments on Twitter and other places, I'm just, shocked to discover that they would even do this. And
that's just naive.
Yeah, and just as a slight, this is like a thumbnail sketch of Marvel and the Pentagon's relationship. But it started in 2003 with the Hulk, which was not a Marvel studio production,
right.
But it had the Marvel logo, and it was the first step in Marvel's cinematic universe. And by 2008, Iron Man had full military support, and don't forget, Tony Stark is basically, runs a Northrop Grumman company, and that's how, that's his whole thing. He is an arms dealer, and a military contractor. By 2012, the relationship begins to sour with the Avengers, because Phil Shrub sort of objects to S.H.I.E.L.D., this organization run by Nick Fury, sort of acting independent of the Pentagon and other things. He doesn't like that. And supposedly they withdraw support because of the Avengers movie, even though the National Guard is featured at the end.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, yep. Which is and Phil Shrub has been Phil Shrub, for people that don't know, although I assume everybody does, he is the Pentagon's entertainment liaison officer for, the film industry. And then the DoD has given some, small support for most recently Captain America: Winter Soldier, and the DoD has certainly been giving support to rival cinematic universes. So, we've got the Batman, Superman, Suicide Squad, things like that. And Marvel has
Justice League is going to be
all over the place. It's going to be one giant long ad for the Pentagon. And of course, Marvel has gone to other, government things like the NASA. They can go to NASA, they could go to the FBI, the CIA, the DHS. There's a million other things that they can and do go to. This to me was just insane. That it's sort of like, did they not know? Are they just that naive to all of this? And it just sort of like, I don't know, it sort of threw me for a bit of a curve with all of that. But what do you, Ryan, what's your sort of opinion on this relationship between them and Northrop Grumman?
Well, I think it was one of those deals. What you have to understand is there is a real, especially among the editorial staff at Marvel, the one thing that these YouTube gripers actually have right about is there is a real sort of culture of arrogance among Marvel editorial. And their whole thing is because they've hit lightning in a bottle so many times over the years, they think that they know what's best and that whatever they come up with, some of it won't hit, but when it does, it'll hit big. And that's proven to be true in the past. So they just go ahead and do whatever the hell they want and don't really gauge fan reaction or even think about it in the least. I mean, if they did, if Marvel was concerned about fan reaction, they would put the reins on some of their staffers on social media and not let people like Nick Spencer basically go on there and pick fights all day, which is what he's infamous for doing. But they don't care how they're perceived. There's a real arrogance at Marvel. So I'm sure Northrop Grumman threw a bunch of money at him, and they just thought, oh, well, we're going to go ahead and do this. And, oh, we're going to make a big show of it at NYCC. And people are going to go nuts, and they're going to like it. And if they don't, well, fuck them. Well, they really backfired the other way because, like you said, fan reaction was totally negative and totally instantaneous. And I'd never seen anything get shut down that quick either, to tell you the truth. That was crazy. So I think it's just a sign of Marvel's kind of corporate culture of arrogance that they know what's best and that fan reaction be damned. That's really how they think.
I almost thought that because the relationship between Marvel and the Pentagon, as we said, sort of soured a little bit, or it's not quite, it's not like what it was with like Iron Man and, or basically whatever they wanted, the Pentagon would provide. So I almost wondered if this Northrop Grumman partnership was a bit of a way to get military hardware You know,
like
they
a
can
replacement?
They can get some drones or whatever, aircraft or some gadgets, things like, as a way of just sort of getting access to some stuff that usually the Pentagon would provide. And then the more I sort of looked at it, I also wondered if it wasn't in Marvel's sort of warped view of the world that, a military contractor arms company like Northrop Grumman is kind of a bit like a superhero in that they operate many times outside legal parameters, in places that, the military can't go. They have crazy gadgets. There's, when you look at some of these companies, they're sort of composed of ragtag groups of mercenaries and things, and that they always sort of push this idea, this STEM stuff, that they're using science for the greater good. Lockheed Martin is keeping us safe by developing more powerful missiles and rockets that can hit North Korea at a moment's notice. And they also recruit many times from the nerd community.
That's big. I mean, are you kidding? They're going around trawling junior high science fairs for, you think basketball recruiters or something? Check out these defense industry recruiters. They're going around at junior high science fairs looking for kids who seem like they're a few years ahead.
Yeah. Well, and so that was my kind of take on this, or my sort of interpretation was I wonder if in their insane minds they didn't think, this is a logical step for us.
I could see that. Absolutely. But I think more than anything, it was they just threw a bunch of money at them and Marvel said, sure. And there's probably, we're probably both right. You know what I mean? Chances are that your little theorizing is pretty accurate, and chances are, too, that they just saw the dollar signs.
Well, I mean, that was the other thing I was going to ask you. I mean, it's just, I assume with something like, a company like Marvel, I mean, they don't really care. You know what I mean, when it comes to morality and things like that. I mean, the fact that they, it's funny because it's sort of like, even though in so many of these comics and stuff, especially, like Marvel's cinematic universe and that kind of stuff, it is like these superheroes, again, act very much like military contractors. In that they're not really beholden to a central government. They're not really beholden to the laws that, govern you or I. They're they kind of do whatever they want, much like, these, huge arms companies and military contractors that, sort of, operate almost in this sort of shadow government. And I wonder if they were just like, well, whatever. I mean, this will sell. And it's funny that for comics fans, they don't see the irony of that or whatnot, that they sort of well, the Pentagon is okay to give support to because they're sort of fighting for the greater good. That seems to be sort of the bargain that many of them have made when it comes to this.
I think you're right. Where a lot of people, if it's a governmental agency, they're cool with it. Like I said, when we were talking on the previous thing about Tom King, man, the reception that he gets in fan circles is huge. Wow, it's so cool that we've got an agent. But when it's a privatized outfit like Northrop Grumman, then suddenly people get up in arms.
Yeah, I know. And again, I mean, it's always fun to point out to people's hypocrisy and whatnot. But it is where have you been? Do you not understand? I mean, it's not just the Pentagon. I mean, the CIA and all sorts of other government entities. But the Pentagon is, where do you think these tanks and aircraft carriers and stuff come from? And more, I think, people are sort of realizing or waking up to the influence that these organizations have. I guess Ryan, as someone that's a bit more sort of close in the community, I mean, what's your sense when it comes to how people view the Pentagon in particularly in like the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I don't think the average fan cares. As long as they've got something. Look, if the average fan cared about the morality or ethics of your average Marvel plotline, they wouldn't go see these movies at all. I know that sounds crazy, but if you look at them, I mean, they're destroying entire countries, entire cities, left and right in these movies. They all basically have a variation of the same plot. I mean, how long did it take for Marvel movies to start feeling pretty old? Maybe 2 movies in? And yet,
I know.
Yeah, and yet that seems to be what they want. So, I don't know. It's really bizarre. Marvel is sort of excelled at, what's the old British expression? Give the punters what they want. I mean, Marvel's movie arm, Marvel Studios, has really excelled at doing that. They found a winning formula right away, stuck with it, and never vary from it in the least. If you look at even stuff like Doctor Strange, it's got the same story. It's Iron Man with magic. That's all it is.
Yeah, no, and I mean, there's certainly, they're milking it to, I mean, almost to the point where, there's such oversaturation, when it comes to this. And like you said, I mean, the plot lines are boring. It's the same thing.
It's the same thing over and over again. The CGI effects are totally interchangeable. If you look at now I don't care for the big Marvel crossover events in comics. We've established that. But if you look at a scene from like their big Civil War crossover comic that came out years before the movie, it's all these heroes, battling against a cosmic backdrop with explosions and shit everywhere. And the Civil War movie comes along and it's 10, 12 superheroes fighting in an airport parking lot.
Yeah,
it's really visually boring.
Well, and there's always that sort of question of, when you become so reliant on the Pentagon, you basically just stop actually caring about storylines. When we'll just get some, tanks and a couple of fighter jets, and we'll get some trucks and we'll blow them up. And I mean, you look at like any Michael Bay movie. That's basically all he uses.
Yeah, there's very little difference between a Marvel Studios production and a Michael Bay flick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And now with Marvel, where it's just like everywhere you turn, it's like Jessica Jones and Iron Fist. There's
Netflix
like
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's like over and over again. Did you
notice that they delayed the rollout of the Punisher Netflix show after the Vegas shooting?
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, so now that's slated for middle of November or like November 19th or something. But yeah, this is the weird thing to me. Marvel's done such a really good job of co-opting the movie critic community, but their Netflix stuff, people seem to be like, no matter how dull, stupid, and retread a Marvel movie is, it'll still get a 90 or 95% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Most of the critics will love it. And yet the Marvel stuff on Netflix, which is just as lousy as the movies, but no lousier in my, basically 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, is getting terrible reviews lately. So that seems strange to me. I don't know if it's the fact that the TV critics aren't getting the free swag package. That, because if you go to like a Marvel premiere screening, you'll get like a Captain America Civil War baseball cap and T-shirt and things like that. And they've been very effective at just basically giving away a few freebies and getting a lot out of it. I don't know if the TV critics aren't getting those same little swag bags or what's going on, but it seems like people are willing and honest enough to admit that Marvel's television productions are horrible, that the Netflix stuff is bad, that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a terrible show, that Inhumans is just a laughingstock. In fact, there's rumors going around that it's already been canceled and they just don't admit it. But in the movies, which again, quality-wise are about the exact same thing, everybody still seems to love them.
Yeah, no, it's strange. I mean, sometimes I almost wonder if we're like, under some sort of a spell when it comes to a lot of this stuff. where we're like incapable of accepting that, or it's just like everything is so shitty around us that, you know, we don't really care. Whatever. I'll see Fast and Furious 20. You know, like another Transformers. I mean, like you said, Robert Downey Jr. is just so fucking long in the tooth. It's like we get it. All right, it's over, man. You know, pack it up. But this is, and this is, you know, with the problem with Marvel and the stuff is that, they really don't create anything new. They are the king of reboots.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a good reason for that. And it actually goes back to the 1970s, which is that their deals with creators are so lousy that there's no incentive for you to create anything new when you're working for Marvel. In the 70s, a guy named Steve Gerber, who is a name that a lot of people should know because, in my view, he's sort of like the Philip K. Dick of comics. 1970s Marvel was really lousy, but Steve Gerber's stuff stuck out for its originality. And he created Howard the Duck. And he sued Marvel for ownership of the character. And they kept that tied up in courts for years. And he went broke and he couldn't get work. And he eventually ended up settling out of court, basically just demoralized and defeated by the whole thing. And so from the time he initiated that lawsuit in the late 70s until a guy named Rob Liefeld, who's just an idiot but one of the original Image founders, till he came along in the early 90s, nobody was willing to create new intellectual property for Marvel. And then Liefeld created like 500 characters that were all interchangeable versions of the same thing in the early 90s, like Deadpool and Cable and all these mutant characters. And then he went off to Image, and then could own his own stuff from there on out. But yeah, Marvel's contracts with freelancers are so airtight that nobody's willing to create new property for them. You'll never see a piece of the action. I remember I read Jim Starlin, the guy who created Thanos and a lot of the other villains and heroes in Guardians of the Galaxy. He was like, yeah, I saw both Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I paid for my own ticket.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's very little upside to coming up with some new kind of, and same goes for DC. There's no real upside for you creating a new character for DC.
And Ryan, where do you see the Marvel Cinematic Universe going? Because again, I'm sure a lot of people are kind of rolling their eyes like, oh, who cares? But for the fact that they are, so much of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has sort of been predicated on their relationship with the government, particularly the military. But, I think in a broader sense, just the entire government. And where do you see it kind of going? Because, as I mentioned before, the DoD may not really, want to help them out. But of course, NASA will help them. There's, the Science Exchange, which is a government organization that loves to help Marvel. I can see the Pentagon getting behind Marvel if it's really advantageous for them. Where do you see that kind of progressing or going, or is it going to kind of fizzle out?
How long have people, you, me, lots of critics out there, been predicting that the superhero craze has overstayed its welcome, and yet it keeps on going on? Every year it looks like, boy, this might be the one that finally does it in. There's this movie coming out. I don't know. People said it about Guardians of the Galaxy. Maybe that'll be the one where Marvel kind of finally strikes out. Or this year it was Wonder Woman, although that's a DC thing, but same thing. People were like, I don't know if people are ready for a female superhero-led movie and all this stuff. And just when you think maybe it's going to die, some new just sensation comes along. So I would bet you that Marvel can keep on doing what they're doing without changing a thing for at least another 10 years.
Which is a sad prospect.
It's a very sad prospect. They will introduce some of these younger characters that they've brought along in the comics. Like I said, they're obviously replacement characters for the silver screen. They'll introduce some of them, and the thing will just keep on plugging away. And yeah, if they need a little help from the Pentagon on occasion, they may not get as much as they used to, but they'll still get it. The Pentagon isn't going to turn down a chance to advertise their products in a movie that's going to make $1 million or $1 billion.
No, definitely. I mean, and it seems like the Pentagon really kind of sees much of the Marvel as just this wonderful soft power propaganda tool.
Sure.
Especially
I think that as the DC movies, I mean, they were a little bit slow getting out of the gate, but now that they've got a few hits behind them, you know that they're going to be fully co-opted too. Like we were saying earlier, you can guarantee that this Justice League thing is going to be one long ad for the Department of Defense.
Well, and I find that's was particularly interesting looking at this Northrup Grumman Marvel ComicCon fiasco, was that, you know, many of these people that were rightly incensed about it, making valid points about, a lot of the comments I heard over and over again were, I like my fantasy and reality separate. I don't want to have to, feel like I'm being manipulated or brainwashed by the military, when I'm reading a comic book or something like that. And the ironic thing being that, like, you're already doing that. Every time you go see these movies, that's all, so just in that sense, I mean, which is why, I hope people are sort of looking at this relationship with a bit of a closer eye, because it's right there. And these people are so, unaware, seemingly, of how much they are being influenced. And then, of course, if we were to really see all of the script changes that the Pentagon and these other entities ask of the directors and writers of these films, and we wonder, well, how does that trickle down into our subconscious? Are we thinking a particular way because of something we saw in the new Captain America movie? Then you really start to sort of be asking some pretty serious questions about all of this stuff. And also, I think if for nothing else, they're making cinema crappy.
Well, that's like, for sure.
I mean, it's just many times. I mean, it makes it boring. It's not that much fun.
And and obviously because Hollywood is as bereft of original ideas as mainstream comics are. If you notice that ever since Marvel got big, the rest of the blockbusters are getting crummier too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
As they try to ape that formula. I mean, I never thought I'd see the day where I was nostalgic for like Steven Spielberg style blockbusters. But my God, they're better than what's coming out these days.
Yeah, definitely. No, I know it's sort of shocking, and it just sort of makes you wonder too. Like you said, with the way that critics love these movies. I mean, it's like, are they even paying attention? Are we just so inundated with garbage that we just all kind of march along with it?
Right, and there's no like particular like standout acting that you can point to in any of these Marvel films or anything, or any kind of standout humorous moments or anything like that. Well, I guess Guardians of the Galaxy has kind of played for yucks, but even there, it's just basically like they take the standard Marvel formula, add 10, maybe 20% more jokes, and all kinds of horrible 70s rock, and then everybody loves it all over again.
No, definitely. I mean, something we'll definitely be returning to again. I also would hazard to say that I don't believe this is the end of Northrop Grumman's attempts to indoctrinate children into joining their ranks. I mean, this is obviously a test case. It didn't go so well, but they'll be back again. They'll figure out some other way of getting in there.
I'll tell you one thing: if they would have just gone ahead and done it, nobody would have said a thing. But what backfired was their big presentation at NYCC and making a big deal of it. If they would have just cranked out this free kids comic to hand out in schools and come out with these ads that run in Scholastic publications or wherever they were going to do these dream and reality ads, they would have gotten away with it just fine. The big mistake on Marvel's part was making a big production out of it at NYCC.
I think that's a great point too, Ryan, because I could just see it. If it's already out there, then it's out there,
Yep.
I could very well see people, being maybe upset, but not to this sort of level. Which again, I think kind of brings, And it's so odd, is that you can't be that overt when you're, producing, state-funded cinema. You have to be a little bit more covert with it. Because if you're that upfront, then people do kind of feel a little uneasy, knowing that, oh God, the CIA did what to this, to meet the parents? You can't do, again, which is, if this was really about entertainment, then the Pentagon and the CIA and these other things would release all the documents on this if it's just about entertainment. Obviously it's about more than that, and they know that, therefore they're not willing to be so sort of upfront with all of this. But Ryan, quickly, because we've only got about maybe 10, 12 minutes left. Anything, last time you were on the show, we talked about Tom King and the CIA. Anything on Tom King that you has come up since then? He's of course writing the Batman stuff. So give us a little bit about that.
Tom King is riding a wave, just like I told you last time, that his popularity and stature in the industry would probably only keep going up. That's proven to be the case. First of all, Tom King's Batman run, he's lucky in that, as usual, ever since the first day he got into the business, he's paired up with some of the best and most popular artists, guys that other guys have to write 5 or 6 years before they get teamed up with. He's been getting paired up with from day one. So his Batman is selling well, but it's not going over too big with fans, and there's a good reason for that. It's actually pretty lousy. He's had a couple of good story arcs here and there, but by and large, the fan reaction to Tom King's Batman has been nice to look at, but the stories are pretty limp. And yet it hasn't affected sales at all, which show that Batman is to comics what Marvel is to movies. Doesn't matter how good or bad it is, people just keep buying it. So that's what's going on there. But at the other end of the spectrum, he's had probably the biggest critical success of the year with Mr. Miracle. And that is one that he's doing with Mitch Gerads, the guy who drew Sheriff of Babylon with him as well. They're doing a 12-part relaunch of Jack Kirby's Mr. Miracle character, which is good. Folks who read my shit will see that I did a review of the first issue. It is good. It's not as good as some of the more breathless reviews out there. I know that CBR's headline was that it's revolutionizing comics. And other big review sites were almost nearly as effusive in their praise. It was getting 10 out of 10 scores on Comic Book Roundup, which is like the sort of like the Rotten Tomatoes of comics, where every critic opinion is weighed up and added. Mm-hmm. It is good, but the ploy is pretty simple, and I called attention to it right away on Twitter, and other people have agreed with me, is that it's Mulholland Drive in comics, only with the suicide attempt at the start instead of the end. The premise is that Mr. Miracle, who's the world's greatest escape artist, has tried to commit suicide, and from there on out, you're supposed to kind of guess how much of what's happening in the book is real or not. And if you remember Mulholland Drive, you're guessing how much of the movie is real or not, and then you learn towards the end that she attempted suicide. And anyway, we won't go down the David Lynch rabbit. But basically he's reversed the order of revelations in Mulholland Drive and then done the same premise. It's very clever. It's very well drawn. It's a very good comic. I would recommend anybody to pick up Mr. Miracle. But it's not the greatest thing since sliced bread, which is what a lot of people were claiming from the get-go. The other bizarre thing about Tom King is that this goes back to inauguration time. He was basically the first person to call bullshit on Trump's inauguration crowds.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that to you or not. But a lot of those things where it was going out on social media that, there's nobody here in D.C. for the inauguration. And remember, Trump got so pissed about it and sent Spicer out the next day. One of the first people to do that was Tom King. He was out walking his dog because he lives around D.C. area. He was out walking his dog, and he took pictures with his camera phone. He's like, there's no one here. Look, here, there's no one here. Look, there's no one here. Look, he took 10, 12 pictures. There was nobody in D.C. for that thing.
Huh.
He was one of the first people to draw attention that he may have been the very first on the Twitter for all I know.
That isn't, I saw some, I think this was fairly recently on Tom King's Twitter page. He had some pictures of him in Iraq, with machine guns, looking all badass. And it was something about, Trump's Muslim ban, is blocking or will send home my, translator who worked with me when I was in the CIA. I know all about this, so it's weird the way he, sort of voices his political stuff, and it's always sort of couched in I worked for the CIA, so I know.
He was for a long time, and it was weird. We were talking on the previous episode of this I was on, how Sheriff of Babylon, for a book set in Iraq, was very apolitical. But yeah, it seems like King is cutting loose a little bit more with his political opinions, but he's not he's not out there arguing with fans all day like a Nick Spencer or something. But I don't feel necessarily comfortable classifying King as either a classical liberal or conservative or whatever you want to call it. I will say it's pretty obvious he can't stand Trump, but that just puts him in league with any person with more than 3 or 4 functioning brain cells.
Yeah, well, and obviously too, he is a CIA agent.
Right. And Trump has pissed off those guys.
Yeah. Oh, certainly. And I wonder if that's not, what motivates some of Tom King's stuff as well.
I don't know, but he was, I don't think Trump had his little running feud with the CIA going by Inauguration Day. I think that came a little later, didn't it?
I can't really remember because, again, with Trump, it's
Trump bullshit.
Well, I know. And then you for all of his, I hate the CIA, then, where's the first place he gives a speech is at Langley. And then that, of course, was, interpreted on the internet as, oh, don't you get it? This is all a hidden message, and Trump is playing, 4D chess with the CIA, and they came up with
Trump can't even play chess.
Yeah, no, probably can't even master checkers.
I doubt it.
But, again, yeah. But he's doing all these sort of things behind the scenes and secret messages in front of the, all these CIA agents.
Just like he's the secret guy taking on all the pedophiles, because, what better guy to go after the pedophiles than a guy who probably is one and who admits he wants to fuck his own daughter.
Yeah, no, and I brought up the article you sent me. I was on the show recently, talking about it's like Trump's the head of Trump's campaign reform or something election.
His thing of where he wants to make it impossible except for anyone but Trump voters to vote. His election reform committee.
Well, and that guy just got caught with child porn.
Yep.
Yeah. So no, of course, I'm sure he's gonna defeat all of all that. Do you get any sense with some of these diversity in comics people, these people on YouTube? Are they kind of Trump supporters, or is there any kind of vein of that?
Yeah, one of those cabal even wears a "Make America Great Again" hat in all his videos.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, there we go. So that is sort of bled into
guys.
all of that. Ryan, Carey, thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love to get you back on soon. We didn't really get to it, but Lazarus, one of my favorite comics, is and I think many people in the alternative community, the conspiracy community, would love it. That has a TV show that's coming out, so perhaps we will review that when it comes out with you. Of course, everyone can go to trashfilmguru.com to find all of Ryan's work. And of course, you can always go to porkinspolicyreview.com to find all my work, and you can support me on Patreon. So thank you all so much for listening, and I will be talking to you very soon.
No rules. No rules. No taboo topics. No taboo topics. No fear of doom. No fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
Since the beginning, civilizations have risen and fallen. Rome, ancient Persia, Mongolia, Britain, and now America. Befallen by natural disasters, broken families, moral decay, lack of preparedness and conflict. Don't let this happen to you. Are you prepared? Would you like to help others prepare? AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com is looking for distributors. Email bugoutamerica@usa.com. Go to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, a veteran-owned and operated company. But do it today.
We all know that they're not telling us the truth. So stand up for your rights, demand the real medicine, and your right to use it and grow it. This is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
And I hope people support American Freedom Radio. And I hope people vote with their dollars and really understand the value of having American Freedom Radio. Because that's my family. If you love me at all, Jack Blood, support American Freedom Radio. Like, my family has literally disowned me. American Freedom Radio, Danny and Don and those guys, those are my actual family. So please support these guys, because they have all the technology, they have all these great things that they're going to do, but obviously they can't do it all by themselves. So not only would I like to see you support them, I'd like to see you retweet them and repost them and really get involved and get on the bandwagon, so to speak, on doing that do-it-yourself promotion, because they're a do-it-yourself radio network, and we just need that so much.
And when we're not invading some sovereign nation or setting it on fire from the air, which is more fun for our Nintendo pilots, then we're usually declaring war on something here at home. Did you ever notice that about us? We love to declare war on things here in America. Anything we don't like about ourselves, we declare war on it. We don't do anything about it. We just declare war on it. It's the only metaphor we have in our public discourse for solving problems, declaring war. We have to declare war on everything. We have a war on crime, the war on poverty, the war on litter, the war on cancer, the war on drugs. But you ever notice we got no war on homelessness? Huh? No war on homelessness. You know why? There's no money in that problem. No money to be made off of the homeless. If you could find a solution to homelessness where the corporate swine and the politicians could steal a couple of $1 million each, you see the streets of America begin to clear up pretty quick. I'll guarantee you that. I will guarantee you that.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow. Friendships to flourish with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio@ymail.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control is good. 5, right, copy. 3, 2, 1.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio.